Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery.
And I'm Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we are the Duality of Man. So the election then,
Yeah, that happened, and
disappointingly normal, basically is how I summed it up, because I think both sides were expecting some kind of massive paradigm shifting shakeup, and we just got kind of a generic midterm election. Meh.
well, personally, I wanted the Democrats to lose, but really, I wanted them to lose for their own good. I feel like if they had lost by a considerable margin, it would have
They
forced them
might
to
learn their lesson.
reevaluate a lot of their yeah, it would have forced them to reevaluate a lot of their current positions and return more towards sanity in the middle. But I feel like because they didn't get outright destroyed, a lot of them are going to double down. And one of the really disgusting things that I saw was a lot of fear mongering and just outright ridiculous lies coming from uh, Democratic politicians and news media. Did you see the video clip where this guy says that if the Republican Party wins a great majority, they're going to basically institute an authoritarian fascist state and kidnap your children.
Yes, it did. See, I don't.
Like,
Again, I'm hesitant to use the word lie because I think they genuinely believe that to some degree. Now, there's obviously some partisan exaggeration on one side or the other for the sake of my rhetoric, but I don't think it's any more flamboyant or exaggeratory of what they actually believe than any other statement by any other politician. So the issue ultimately is the failure to see the other side as goddamn human and failure to see other frameworks as in any way rational. Um, and that's part of the problem. It is both.
I saw a
Eh,
lot of
Go ahead. Sorry.
I saw a lot of propaganda this season about how the democracy was on the line and how if things didn't go a certain way, it would be the end of democracy. And
Quote unquote our
like
democracy. Yeah.
it just yeah, you really have to wonder what universe these people are living in because no one who actually lives in reality could say those things. It'd just be too ridiculous.
Okay, I will explain something that absolutely floors me about this whole thing. This our democracy thing. Our democracy in this context means the democracy of the valid people. And what's another word for the democracy of the valid people, i.e., a certain percentage of people are just invalid and therefore inadmissible to the discussion? There is and
The
has been
liberty.
forever a word for that. That word is aristocracy. That is what aristocracy means. It means a democracy of the valid people, of your betters. And that's essentially what the phrase our democracy always means. It's kind of like how I always lose my shit when it comes to the idea of um, people in a democratic republic, i.e., America, having such a fear mongering petulant response to the idea of populism when the word populace is literally the Latin version of the word demos from which we even get the goddamn word democracy. So I'm sorry, but if you are in a democratic country in broad strokes, not a pure democracy, you know what I'm saying. If you're in a country whose electoral basis is in democracy to some degree, and you are not a populist, then you are doing it wrong. Because to
Yeah, a
be
populist is basically
democratic
a
is to be
candidate.
in favor of populism by definition.
A populist is essentially a candidate who is beholden to the people and gets his rhetoric from the concerns of the people. Like,
and who trusts the people to make sane and rational choices. Because that's ultimately where all of this is coming from. It comes from the elitist attitude of, if we let the peasants have an opinion, then the opinion the peasants will have will necessarily be wrong. It's the classic. If people have the freedom to choose, they might choose the wrong thing. And I fundamentally disagree on that with both counts. I think that the people necessarily are usually smarter than the people they elect, because if that wasn't the case, how the hell would we even get to this point? Fundamentally, the root of America is a bunch of um, otherwise quote unquote invalid people going, we are not being represented by the people who are ruling over us, so fuck the ruling class.
you know, one of the most astonishing things that I saw this election are, places like California and New York, cities that, states that are, decaying in real time. We can watch them descend into madness, and yet they would still vote for the same people who are causing the problems that their city are facing. Like, there's been a rise in people being pushed onto subway tracks in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they're still voting for the people who are going for this soft on crime, cashless bail approach to law enforcement.
To be fair, there is in accordance with this a mass exodus of people from these places to other places, and that might be part of the problem, because the only people left in places like San Francisco or New York are the people who can't either afford to get out and therefore are just going to be subject to the whims of the state no matter what happens, or the people who are not sane enough to realize to get out of Dodge and therefore are okay with the ideological woo.
I mean, that's
Unfortunately,
true,
it
but
seems like the
you would
people
think
who
that,
do leave places like New York wind up in Pennsylvania, and now we have Fetterman. So,
yes, we are being represented by a man whose brain is quite literally broken.
like,
Did you
okay,
did you see the debate?
oh God, the debate. Oh Jesus. Yes, yes, I did. And for the
Yeah,
record, I
that
have cerebral
debate
palsy,
was
which means I also literally have brain damage. I am 99.99999% sure I would be a better politician than Fetterman, because I can at least string a
yes,
coherent goddamn sentence together.
yes. Did you actually could explain your ideas, and you don't need like a closed caption system to, you know, live translate what somebody is saying to you.
Yeah, that in and of itself, I think one of the biggest problems with quote unquote our democracy in this day and age, teleprompters need to be outlawed. If you aren't good enough at public speaking to engage with information on the fly, like and 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 I know that might be a high standard, but here's the thing. We live in the world of 2022. We live in a world where there are live streamers, there are YouTubers, there are people who, there are Twitch streamers, etc. There are people who just in the general populace are capable of reacting to information on the fly and engaging in arguments on the fly with a fairly reasonable degree of erudition. It's not perfect, because no system is going to be perfect, but given we live in a world where our politicians are apparently not good enough at public speaking to be comparable to YouTube stars and Twitch streamers, there's something fucking rotten here in Denmark, is all I'm saying. Maybe we should outlaw teleprompters, period.
I think another thing that we should outlaw is early voting. Because here's the thing:
Uh,
early voting is essentially voting before you have all the information available about both candidates.
necessary to make the decision, yeah.
A lot of people early voted before they saw the Fetterman Oz debate and said that they would not have voted for Fetterman if they had seen that debate before casting their early voting. So why the hell would you even do early voting? Like, it's ridiculous to choose somebody to represent you in the federal government before you have all the information about them.
Here's the other thing. Voting day needs to be a national holiday where most of the workplaces are closed, because the other problem is a large percentage of the people who would probably vote are prevented from voting by virtue of the fact that the show must go on and we have work to do. Making making
I used
making voting day on a Tuesday in and of itself is kind of a pain in the ass in the modern world. But you add on to that very few people have off on Tuesdays, and then it becomes an even bigger clusterfuck.
yeah,
It
it should be a national day off, but also I saw a lot of candidates who were trying to duck debates until like the very last second. I think we should have a mandatory two debates like for federal offices.
I would go in relation to my previous point about you should outlaw fucking teleprompters. I think any politician who refuses to debate should not be eligible to be elected. Because again, you need to be able to engage conscientiously with information and arguments. And if you are not willing to do those things for whatever reason, and I get that there might be some valid reasons it's not to debate. I get that. But for every one valid excuse not to debate, there are 10,000 reasons that basically boil down to I just don't wanna because I know I'm going to look bad, or I just don't wanna because I don't believe my opponent is valid and I don't want to engage with people outside of my bubble. And fuck all of that noise as far as I'm concerned.
I
If
think
you
another
are a
good idea.
politician, your job is to debate publicly, which means engaging with ideas, preferably without a script or a goddamn teleprompter, if we're being entirely honest.
Yeah, I think another good idea would be to make it so that people running for federal elections in certain states are they're forbidden from accepting money from entities or people who live outside of that state. Why would you be accepting money from somebody who doesn't even live in the state that you're trying to run to represent? Like that
Yeah,
just
that,
smacks of corruption to me.
that's a good point. And I know we already have number caps, but there are too many ways around large donations to say so. Like unless you're talking about civilian donations, you shouldn't even be able to get money for campaigns, frankly.
Personally, I'd be in favor of banning all political parties, but one step at a time.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I don't know if I would go that far, because you do need some kind of organizational structure of like it
Do
can't just
you? If
be
you're running in
every
a
man
certain
for
area,
himself.
if you're running in a certain area, it's pretty easy to connect with people of that area, especially now that we're in the age of the internet. Maybe before people had to rally together in order to make sure that people would be able to be heard, but now anybody can be heard all over the world.
Uh-huh. I mean that is a point, but it, I I don't see it as a particularly practical solution to get rid of parties, and I
No, it's
think
not practical at
that
all. It's a pipe dream.
I think there are enough reasons to keep parties that you're always going to have some kind of difficulty with that. That being said, there are plenty of sensible solutions, several of which we just outlined, that would solve many of these problems. And I will say kudos to the founders of this country for um, being as prescient as they were, and basically preemptively offering up as many contingencies as they could reasonably be expected to for these problems. The only problems with a lot of the founder solutions is I don't think they went far enough. For example, the Electoral College, they didn't they it's not their fault they didn't foresee civilization growing beyond their wildest dreams, but that is where the ball lies now. And so I think the Electoral College needs to have even more power than it already did back in the day.
See, we have Ed Brewer saying that the left bet hard on abortion to save them, and it did. I mean, kind
It
of.
didn't.
They're still going to lose the House of Representatives, but I would say that it did play a factor, especially considering that like so many people were dishonest about what it would actually mean. The Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade
The,
thought it
the
was going
idea
to
of
ban
the
abortions.
idea
Like,
of it
no,
not being
it's
universally
just going
legal
to
means
make
it's
abortion a
automatically
state issue.
banned is just facile in the extreme. And and to be
Yeah,
fair,
just
The Republicans didn't help because some of them actually did try to outright ban it, which is just stupid. Because
that
even the
was a
most
that
e- e-
was a stupid I heard. Like
go ahead.
that was just that was Lindsey Graham, who I'm sure we could both agree is a member of the machine of the
Yeah,
Washington machine
the
that just
the
needs to
most
go.
establishment of establishment Republicans. Fuck yeah, fuck Lindsey Graham so conceivably hard.
Yeah, but you know, I think that this kind of was a um a turnaround because if they do lose the House representative, the Democrats, then a lot of the stuff that they're going to want to push through will get blocked, which is
Yeah,
good in my opinion because you see what happens when they're able to push through a lot of the
they'll be
stuff they
rendered
want. Like,
impotent, or at least more impotent than they currently are, which is even saying something.
yeah, because look, these people had their shot to run the country, and they've shown they can't. They don't know how to run a country properly.
Have you seen the grocery bills and the gas bills and the every other conceivable kind of fucking bill? Now, granted, some of that was inevitable because of lockdowns, and some of that was Trump's fault for going along with basically what everyone else was doing to some degree. But Biden
They made it
wanted to
worse.
make it longer, and he did not help anything.
Yeah, he was actively threatening people that if they didn't get the vaccine, that they would be forced to lose their jobs until I believe the Supreme Court ruled that to be unconstitutional.
You will take the shot, or you will be shot. Jawohl. Yeah, it's just. Yeah, and I apologize for the fucking Godwin's law evocation there, but there's only so many ways this could be bureaucratically authoritarian before I'm just instantaneously shifting into the German accent just by reflex. You will take the shot or you will be shot. And this is non-negotiable, yeah. Uh,
Yeah, another big concern was the war in Ukraine, the constant funding of the Ukrainian military. Like,
the war
I
we
feel
shouldn't
for the
even goddamn be in because it has
like
literally nothing to do with anything.
I feel for the Ukrainians, but I'm not willing to burn down my own country to save them.
Yeah, and this is the problem with being as prone to quote unquote foreign aid as we are. Foreign aid is all well and good if your country is on good standing of its own, but again, I'm looking around the country here, and I'm friends with quite a lot of people from quite a lot of different places around these parts, and things aren't exactly the most stable thing here either, and that worries me a bit when we're more interested in sending trillions of dollars overseas than, I don't know, using trillions of dollars to update infrastructure, again, give Medicare for all a try, any of these other problems that definitely need to be resolved. Maybe mitigating inflation through some clever economic policies. I'm just spitballing here. There are better uses for that trillions of dollars. I'm not opposed to spending the money, but I'm opposed to spending money stupidly. Like, I don't mind the money being spent, but I do mind what it's being spent on, and what it's being spent on is putting everyone else before ourselves, and that's bullshit.
Another thing is this like ridiculous green agenda that they keep pushing in the middle of an energy crisis.
And yet we won't and can't, and it's immoral to talk about nuclear power because we're also afraid of Chernobyl or that one time in Japan, even though literally it took communism's incompetence and or a literal goddamn tidal wave act of God to make nuclear power not work. Because here's the thing. Yes, nuclear power is dangerous. It's a fundamental force of creation. We all understand this. But because we all understand this, we have gone above and beyond to make sure that nuclear power is one of the safest and most efficient forms of energy we have. And it does literally take mismanaging on a communist scale, or a literal act of tidal waves, i.e., literally Mother Nature just going fuck you in particular, for nuclear power to fail like it does. And even then, as bad as the Japanese situation was, it was actually fairly contained because of all the existing safety measures. So even a tidal wave is not much of an obstacle as long as you don't put communist ideologues in charge of constructing the damn thing. But my point is, nuclear power is the only sensible current alternative to fossil fuels. It's several times cleaner than fossil fuels, it's several times more efficient than fossil fuels, and it's several times safer than fossil fuels. So why are we still acting like doing anything with nuclear power is tantamount to putting a literal nuke in the heart of every city?
Like I said, because the people who fund these organizations are invested in solar and wind.
Even though you would assume with all that extra investment money, they might be able to, I don't know, make these things efficient enough to actually function for the purposes for which they're intended. But never mind.
The technology just isn't advanced enough, and let's not forget the fact that the blades for wind turbines are non-biodegradable, which means that when they eventually, inevitably, get damaged, they're just going to be sitting in a landfill until the inevitable
Yeah, and if
burning of the
they
earth by the
get
expansion
degraded
of the
at
sun.
all, if they get degraded at all, the stuff they're made from is so poisonous to the environment that it's literally goddamn worse than lighting a petroleum fire in the middle of every goddamn city would be. So it's literally cutting off your nose to spite your face. We want to be green. Okay, well, don't use poisonous substances to build the green things then. Oh, never mind. We'll just use these plastic and fiber optics infused pieces of giant fuck off metal to make wind turbines out of. But that doesn't solve the. Oh, never mind. Uh, sometimes I feel like I'm the only person in the world who is. Either I'm going crazy and the rest of the world is fine, or the rest of the world is going crazy and I'm the one person who's safe. I don't know which.
Do you want to talk about the deciding factor or the defining constituency for this election? It was Gen Z people 18 to 29, and I believe that they voted D plus 28, if I remember my figures correctly. Just a
Yeah.
massive, massive voter block. It's like the inexperienced and the stupid. That's That's the Democrats' bread and butter
And
now,
and
apparently.
and, and by the way, I think we're both millennials, and hashtag not all, obviously, um, because there are plenty of millennials and Gen Zers who are as anti woke and as anti bullshit as you can get. Unfortunately, every institution force feeds the problem, and therefore the the those of us that are more independently minded often get drowned out of the conversation because we're not valid people, derp.
Yeah. You know who these are? These are the people that you see in street interviews that are out protesting, and then when somebody asks them to elaborate on their position, they have no idea what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, they fail utterly to actually elaborate on anything whatsoever. Or these are the people who get spoon fed by the likes of Vosh and Hassan Piker and what little remains of Cenk Uygur, and don't think things through any further than that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not I am quite left wing as far as everything goes. I consider myself a Scandinavian style social democrat. So it's not it for me it's not a right versus left thing, but it is very much um a libertarian versus authoritarian thing. And right now, the majority of people who are capable of being authoritarian, keyword being capable, are the social justice academics and the people who are inculcated by social justice academics. And there's a lot of those right now. And don't get me wrong, if the tradcon evangelical family values types make a run at it tomorrow and start banning D&D and fucking I heard a story about a school board banning mouse because of its sexualized content. I'm just as opposed to those guys as I am to the other ones. It's just a matter of one of these people is powerful at the moment, the other is not. Granted, I would love a world where neither of these things existed, but baby steps.
Yeah. Well, one position that the Democrats have taken that I don't understand why on earth they take that position is that in the controversy regarding the school boards and the parents, they take the side of the teachers against the parents. Like, what
Yeah, and
what
let's
sense
not
does
let
that even make?
we've already gone into the clusterfuck that is modern day academia with its um with its roots in Hegelian dialectics and critical theory and deconstructionalism and everything, post structuralism and postmodernism and post um I believe the term is neo historicism with regards to literature and everything. So it, the problem of the educational system is one of paradigms. It's all the intelligent people are becoming convinced of an increasingly stupid worldview, but because they're the intelligent people, they have just enough intelligence to convince themselves of stupid shit, and then because they're the intelligent people, they get to proselytize to every other aspect of society from other educational systems to journalism to entertainment to pick one, basically, a realm of the public sphere.
I believe the term is midwit. Is is a good shorthand for that. It's people who are just smart enough to convince themselves of a stupid idea, but not smart enough to follow it all the way down to its logical conclusion to see how stupid it is.
I occasionally refer to it as the misuse of intelligence because here's something they never tell you that I will stand by until my dying day. Stupidity is nowhere near as dangerous as the active misuse of intelligence because because stupid people tend to be unambitious and stupid people also tend to occasionally have self-awareness and realize they're stupid. Intelligent people who are misusing their intelligence are kind of like strong people who use their power only to bully people. It's not a lack of intelligence that's the issue. It's a active misuse of the intelligence you do have.
I also think that stupid people can be convinced if you show them that they're wrong. Meanwhile, these people are so damn sure of how smart they are that they won't even contemplate the fact that they might be incorrect.
Well, it's because once it's as per usual, it's the difference between understanding empiricism and understanding logic. Because here's the thing, especially in today's day and age, with the world the way it is, you can find raw data to back up any position under the sun. But one thing that we don't have a large degree of is people who are capable of looking at the logic that underpins things. And it's a little bit like mathematical equations. If you have a mathematical equation which makes no goddamn sense, no matter how much actual data you plug into that false structure, you're going to get completely irrelevant or irreverent data. But if you have a logical equation, a logical structure to plug that information into, then no matter how little data you have, you'll always at least get a logical conclusion. And what we have now is a situation where people assume that having a lot of raw data means they must be logically coherent. And what that results in is a bunch of people with faulty logical parameters, with faulty equations, plugging valid data into those faulty equations and assuming that the answers they get, which are demonstrably wrong if you think about them for 5 seconds, must be the only answer because, well, I obviously started with raw data and I plugged them into a framework that I say makes sense, therefore I must be right. But they don't have the capacity to critically examine the logic, not the empiricism, but the logic that underpins their worldview. And the other problem is people are what I call worldview blind, which is they can't see anyone else's framework as in any way reasonable. And therefore, you wind up with people constantly either arguing past each other, or even more commonly than that, in my experience, presupposing their understanding of somebody else instead of actually addressing what people say they believe, i.e., you don't believe the thing you said you believe this other thing because it fits my conception of you better than that.
Yeah. Even though you're actively telling me you don't believe that and you believe this.
Or the thing you said fits into this chain reaction I have, so when you say X, you must mean Z because I say so. Even though it's a failure to tell the difference between what someone actually believes and your interpretation of what someone actually believes. There are so many people who will not, under any circumstances, separate the raw information of what someone believes and how they choose to interpret it. And no matter how much you get them to, and no matter how much you point out to them, you are interpreting in between point A and B here, and it's giving you false conclusions. They can't see the difference. They can't separate their their interpretation from the raw information. It,
Let me ask you about the future. Where do you think the parties are going to go from here? Because I've been seeing a lot of talk online about the Republican Party, a lot of people who want to basically keep the MAGA movement but ditch Donald Trump. Because despite the fact that I think a lot of the things that Donald Trump did while he was president, his policies, not necessarily the words that were coming out of his mouth, were good. However, the media has done an extremely good job of making people not like him, and I don't think that's going to go away.
but that's not going to work is the problem. I think if you try to keep the libertarian populist movement that Trump started, the MAGA movement as it's called, and jettison Trump, then those people who see Trump as the ideal of what it means to be MAGA, or the people who, let's face it, because there are people who do view Trump in a cult of personality sort of way. If you try to jettison Trump from MAGA, you're going to cripple MAGA because the people who like Trump are going to follow Trump, and the people who view Trump as the end goal of MAGA are going to go with Trump. And then the only thing you'll have left are the people who are conformist enough to play by the rules, but MAGA enough to be oppositional. And the problem is with that, those people always existed. Your DeSantis's, your Rand Paul's, etc. And they weren't very effective because they were so willing to play by the rules. The,
I
the,
know.
pro- the
I don't
problem
know.
with the
DeSantis
problem with
has
constantly
proven.
being willing to play by the rules is if the game you're playing happens to be rigged or erroneous in some way, then no amount of playing by the rules is ever going to give you a fair result because the game itself is unfair.
I don't know. DeSantis has made a pretty good name for himself, being the governor of Florida. People seem to like the way that he's governed, and he's taken shots at reversing a lot of the more woke policies that existed within Florida.
Yeah, DeSantis is by far and away the best one, but I think what he should do, and what I think everyone should aspire for him to do, is he should be Trump's running mate in 2024. He should replace Pence. And then once Trump's second term has been accomplished, then DeSantis becomes the heir apparent. But I think you have to have that transition period from Trump light to heir apparent for everyone to align with DeSantis. I think if you try to replace Trump with DeSantis, you're just going to turn him into the um the normie equivalent of Trump, and that's going to turn off a lot of the grassroots potential of the MAGA movement, I think.
Now, question: do you think Donald Trump could win in 2024? Because the thing is, we could just allow Joe Biden to keep burning everything to the ground to the point where people suffer enough to get over their um, indoctrinated hatred of Donald Trump.
I think Trump is going to win in 2024 regardless because, and I hate to say this because again, I am left wing ultimately. I'm a social democrat and a classical liberal. But I don't see the Democrat having anyone who's even comparable to Trump. I don't see anyone
Well,
in the Democratic side of
Biden
things.
says he's planning on running again.
Um, and he will
I don't
run
think that would be a good
basically as a
idea.
corpse. So no. My point is that I used to, and I still hold to this to some degree. I used to hold that there are only like four decent politicians on either side. You know you've got your Trump, your DeSantis, your Steve Bannon, and your Rand Paul on the one side, and you've got your Tulsi Gabbard, your Andrew Yang, your Ro Khanna, and I would have said Bernie, but Bernie has proven himself a failure multiple times.
I
But
mean,
I
Tulsi left
yeah,
the
yeah, and that's what I was getting to. I used to say that, and then Tulsi left to pursue her own interests, and so much better for her because her reasoning to leave was perfectly accurate. Um, and Yang also kind of went off to do his own thing and made this weird coalition between himself and like these weird traditionalist Republicans, and that's not why anyone who liked Yang, and I know because I was a massive Yang supporter. Um, so we're left in a situation where two of the three or four decent Democratic candidates are no longer decent Democratic candidates because they've left the party basically. So and even then, it was an outside chance that the party would smarten up and actually run someone worth voting for in 2024. And my money, because I am on the left, and so I do know the difference between the grassroots Democrats and the establishment Democrats. My money is on they're gonna run somebody like um what's his name Mike Bloomberg, or what was the other guy's name, the really establishment stooge who said that nothing the grassroots wanted was actually feasible bullshit. Um, he was a bald guy. Forget his
Booker?
name. Huh?
Wasn't Cory
No,
Booker.
no, the white bald guy, the one that basically was nothing but an also rand, and he got booed during a speech.
Doesn't really
Forget his
narrow
name.
it down.
I, God damn it!
I'm trying to remember. I just can't. I'm sorry.
There are too many goddamn awful. But my point, basically, getting back to the point, is I think the establishment Democrats are going to try one more time to run an establishment Democrat that no one in the grassroots of the party actually likes, and they're going to fail horribly because no one in the grassroots of the party actually likes them.
Do you think
And
Kamala's going to run?
that's a sincere possibility. And if that happens, then you could dig up the corpse of Ron Paul Sr. Ron Paul, and it would still do better than than Kamala Harris, because everyone on the Bernie slash like Yang Tulsi side of the party, the grassroots part of the party, refers to Kamala as Kamala the cop, and we all remember the Kamehameha wave that Tulsi Gabbard delivered to Kamala's career the last time with the "Your own record no jitsu."
Did you make that reference because she's Hawaiian?
No, I made that reference because I was making anime references
Uh,
to Dragon Ball and Naruto respectively. I like referring to what Tulsi did as the your own record no jitsu move, because it's basically the debating tactic equivalent of Naruto's talk no jitsu.
yeah. Also, I'm pretty sure Akira Toriyama named that move after the Hawaiian king, who's what actually named Kamehameha.
Yes, I remember that, but I was at that particular moment more focused on the weebness of it than the historical tidbit. But in any case, Kamala went from 15% of the vote to less than 5% of the vote after one debate, um was because of Tulsi going, "Look at your record, now back at me. Now look at your record, now back at me." It was one of the most amazing debate performances I've ever seen. It's
If
unsurprising that shortly after that, the establishment was like, "We can't afford Tulsi to ever be on the debate stage with her ever again."
if Kamala did run, I would want the Republicans to run Tulsi just for the lulls.
Okay, there's that. There's that. And there's also the, irregardless of whoever you run, Republicans, if Kamala runs, take that clip of that debate, take the Tulsi Gabbard, your own record no jitsuing Kamala Harris, and put it in every campaign ad. Everyone. Because Kamala must not be allowed to live her prosecutorial record down. Ever. That is a gift wrapped instant win button if Kamala runs for the Republicans.
You know,
Or for
we would
the
see.
non-establishment Democrats if the party ever smartens up and lets a Bernie-like type person win. Honestly, my only hope with regards to the Democratic Party right now is Ro Khanna. He's the only one left that I think is sane. So
You know,
Ro
we've
would
been
be my
seeing a
choice.
massive demographic shift politically. A lot of Latino voters are starting to switch parties because a lot of the things that they care about, immigration and crime, are things that the current administration has been failing at recently. It turns out that people who are legal immigrants that have gone through the actual process don't like
Don't like illegals
unfettered
very
illegal
much.
immigration. And also, they're very concerned about crime and gang violence in their communities.
And here's the other unsung truth of this whole Latinos thing. This was inevitable. And I say inevitable because here's the thing. A lot of Latinos are very religious, very conservative Catholics. And if the Democrats ever thought that you could throw a bunch of Latinos in here and never have that matter, you're stupid. It's the same as the people who wonder why the Cuban immigrants in Florida always vote for DeSantis. It's
They're
because
fleeing communism.
they come from Cuba and they're seeing things in America that is similar to Cuba, and their response is basically, "Oh, all of the fuck no."
Also, a lot of Venezuelans are saying the exact same thing now.
Yeah, because unsurprisingly, when people who are of a religious Catholic bent and a Hispanic bent, also with history of going through these sorts of authoritarian overreaches, see authoritarian overreaches happening, their response is whatever the Spanish word for fuck no is.
Yeah, look, I read an article recently about how, like, the Republican Party is starting to get more working class people and more minorities, while the Democratic people are starting to become whiter and wealthier.
Yep, because they're goddamn aristocrats, and everyone knows they're goddamn aristocrats. And here's the funny thing about
Oh,
champagne socialism, and I think we've touched on this before, but the problem with champagne socialists that they will never understand is they want to simp for the working class in the abstract, but they assume a platonic hive mind of the working class that simply doesn't exist. And so when the working class that actually exists doesn't operate within their framework, they are confused as fuck by it. And they assume that the working class in question must just not know what's good for them, quote unquote. I've literally seen people make that point of like, oh, it's not their fault. They're just not educated enough, as though there's only one correct answer and education is the deciding factor.
now, regarding one of the issues we mentioned earlier, crime, you know, this whole criminal reform in the form of cashless, it seems to be an outright failure. And if I was going to reform it, one of the ways that I would do is that, um, if you are a nonviolent first offender who is accused of a nonviolent crime, then you could be released on cashless bail. However, if you've been if you've been you know arrested
Repeat
before,
offender or
you're
violent
being remanded
offender.
without bail. Yeah,
Well, and here's
but it's like
here's
a
the
lot of
other
these people
thing.
who have criminal records that are very, very long are still being released without bail.
15 convictions, 13 of them for violent bullshit or semi-violent bullshit, and then cashless bail. And here's the other thing. I know what they're doing for. They're trying to say, well, if we make freedom conditional on money, then that's classist and bullshit. And I get that to some degree. However, the purpose of bail is to act as a deterrent for people abusing essentially the leniency of the courts. Um, Bail essentially was an act of mercy, and the idea of bail was basically the same as when you get a loan from the bank and they take something valuable from you as collateral. It's essentially a deterrent of, okay, we're going to extend a little bit of faith to you. Here is our guarantee you won't completely fuck this over. And
I
without
think one
cash being a factor in that, it's very hard to see it as in any way a deterrent anymore.
one idea that I heard about this is that you make bail proportionate to their yearly income. So it's like what 2 or 5% of whatever their yearly income is. So it's like if you make $100,000 a year, you would pay like $5,000 for bail.
Yeah.
And if you make like 50,000, you'd make like 2,500.
I would also go so far as to say like it should go up in proportion to what you're accused of. And yes, that's a little bit harsh because there are people who are falsely accused. But if if you're accused of a violent crime like say rape or murder, you should have to pay considerably more than someone who just got caught with some weed in their pocket or whatever, or a drug dealer or something. And here's the other thing. Speaking of prison reform, and I know we've talked about this before because we did an entire prison show. Free all the non-violent drug offenders, please. It's like 70% of the goddamn prison population, and the prisons are basically criminal colleges that do nothing but harden criminals. So why the fuck are we so uh, draconian in regards to non-violent drug offenses?
I feel like we shouldn't just mass release all of them. What we should do is conduct interviews, including interviews with a psychologist to determine whether or not um, whether or not they would how high their propensity to reoffend was. That if it was low, then release them immediately. But if it was high, then they just serve out the rest of their sentence.
Well, and it also should be considered in relation to what crimes they are likely to offend with. Because again, if your only crime under the sun is being a drug dealer, then I'm sorry, but that's barely anything. Especially given that a lot of these drugs shouldn't even be criminalized heavily in the first place. Um, but that's neither here nor there. Um,
If you want
but
more on
yeah,
that, watch the Duality of Man and Drugs.
yes, there was an entire episode where we discussed this. It was one of the ones where I think we were the most at odds with each other, where there was the most of a duality. But
Yeah,
conversations like that are always interesting. So there's that. Um, in any case, yes, I think the bail system needs to be reformed a second time. Um, Now go away, or we shall reform you a second time. Basically, is what needs to happen with the bail reform thing.
I think another problem is open air drug use in big cities. Like I don't know if you've seen any of the videos that are coming out of like New York, Philadelphia, San Francisco,
The
but
tent cities
it's
with
like
all the
streets
needles and
lined with
homeless people and whatnot. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like streets lined with people that you can clearly see are high out of their damn minds.
And again, if these substances were legal and were regulated to medical quality and purity standards, a lot of this problem would be a non-problem. But that's one policy mountain to move at a time here. we're trying to
Even
we're trying to save the country. We don't have time to save the rest of the legal system.
here's the thing, like even if that stuff was regulated and legal, I don't think it's something that should be done, like out and open in the street.
Yeah, I mean there's a reason why recreational drugs like alcohol are usually most often imbibed in the home. And again, maybe in a not so distant sane future, there would be places you could go like bars with alcohol, um, where you can indulge in various drugs. And the other thing is when we catch people who are addicted to drugs, we should treat them like medical issues, not criminal issues. And that's the other part of the problem. Um, because if we locked drug addicts in a rehab facility instead of a prison, they'd be less likely to just score again and then be back on the street whenever they get out of prison again. And again, prisons are criminal colleges, and they do nothing but harden small time offenders into large time offenders, and that's no bueno. But we did a whole duality of men on the duality of men in prison, and we did a whole duality of men on the duality of men in drugs. Let's not sidebar this any further than we already have.
It's one thing that I read that the Republicans were hoping to be able to accomplish if they had taken the Senate. They're hoping to launch an investigation into like things like COVID lockdowns and Dr. Fauci. Do you think we need Senate investigations and committees in order to look into that? Because a lot of damage was done by these lockdowns. Like people died because of them.
I think for if for no other reason than to be, and I hate this phrase, but if we must entertain this notion of being on the right side of history, I think history is going to look back on the COVID lockdowns in the same way we look back on some of the absurd things that people did during like the Black Plague or the Spanish flu. And that's no bueno. We
Because
either can face the consequences of our stupidity now, or we can face it 20 or 30 years from now when the dust is cleared and history has passed judgment, and we're we we're going to find that we were the baddies. I think if uh,
I
if
wasn't.
we don't pay our consequences. Well, no, we as in you and myself were not, because I think we were both on the side of what the fuck are lockdowns and why. But I mean, society in general has a rude awakening coming in 20 or 30 years when the dust is cleared on this whole lockdowns thing.
Yeah, and the reports are coming in that American education is even worse than it was before the lock. Like that whole Zoom schooling thing was just an absolutely
Oh,
terrible
God.
idea. And American education wasn't really in a good place to begin with. And after this, it's even
The
worse.
the only the only good thing about the COVID lockdown Zoom thing was it red pilled a bunch of parents realizing what the fuck their children were learning, and that was good. But yeah, no, everything. What basically happened there is either you're going to wind up with a generation of shut-ins who are used to being sort of forcefully introverted, or you're going to wind up with a generation of reckless rebels who, because they were repressed as children, are going to compensate by being as reckless as conceivably possible. And of course, there's the middle option of some of this generation are going to wind up being the introverted, shut in autistic types, and some of this generation are going to wind up being the reckless, burn everything to the ground, anarchistic types, and the combinations thereof are going to be even more difficult to deal with than one or the other. That's why I always laugh at the idea that some shadowy cabal did the lockdowns on purpose to make people more like sheep. Because even if that's why they did it, even if we do entertain the it was all a sinister cabal effort all along thing, they're not right. It's not going to actually produce sheep. It's going to produce either very introverted autistic people who are very good at spotting bullshit, because the funny thing about autistic people is high functioning autistics are very, very good at spotting bullshit. Cough, cough, 4chan, cough. Um, or it's going to wind up with a bunch of iconoclastic rebels who will not be repressed in any means whatsoever. And in any case, that's not the sheeple you were intending. It's going to wind up with two classes of people who are both very good in their own ways at untelling your lies and unraveling your bullshit. So, possible optimistic future? Question mark. I guess they created their own worst enemies.
Let me ask you one final question. Do you think the divide in this country is going to be repairable? Because during this election, I saw people cross a lot of lines of decency that I didn't even.
No, we're there until they were
Yeah,
crossed. See, I will maintain. I've been saying this for years. I think what we're in now is the end of a paradigm, and things aren't going to start being sane again until we ditch the current paradigm we're operating under and find a new one. So I guess the answer is yes and no, in the sense that the answer is no for the foreseeable future until this current paradigm has ended. The answer is ultimately yes, though, because eventually there's going to be a new paradigm, and in that new paradigm, there will be a new shared worldview or a new shared consensus. My money is on the libertarian and populist wings of both parties rising up against the establishment aristocratic elitist stooges of both parties, and what's going to unify everyone is the idea that of like libertarian populist non-interventionism. That would be where my money's going. Maybe I'm a bit optimistic,
that would
but
be great. Uh, that would be great. The only issue that I have with that would be that that appears to have a, a pretty strong populist base. The left wing populists being absorbed by the machine.
hmm. You glitched out a little bit there. I didn't hear the last thing you said.
Sorry, I
The
just thought
left
that
wing populist, and then you cut off.
it just I just I just um, I keep seeing the left wing populists getting absorbed by the machine.
Yeah, there is a problem with that. However, for every couple squad members or young Turkses, there's at least one Jimmy Dore. You see that's why I haven't lost faith in the left wing populists, because when Jimmy Dore split from the Young Turks because the Young Turks were being, as the Young Turks often are, stupid beyond all measure, a large percentage of the left wing base sided with Jimmy Dore over the Young Turks or over Kyle Kalinski's or over the Bosch's. And and I will say I used to have a lot more faith in the left wing populists thanks to Kyle Kalinski, but Kyle has gone well and truly off the deep end, and it makes me sad. But we still have a Jimmy Dore, so I think there is hope for a left wing populist movement. My money is on a future where the right wing is guided by basically like ANCAP Randian libertarianism and or like Aristotelian virtue ethics, and the left is a bunch of classically liberal social democrats guided by Kant's categorical imperative or Rawls' veil of ignorance standard, and they'll meet somewhere in the middle, and that's the other thing is, if that happens, while those two points of reference are different, they do have enough crossover that common ground could be found, especially in opposition to elitist, moralistic, pompous, aristocratic establishmentism, which is where we currently are. Again, maybe I'm too naive, but I'm optimistic for the future. I just think it's going to take some we're gonna have to walk through some fire to get us there. But that was gonna happen one way or the other anyway.
Yeah, I hope we can get there, but maybe not in our lifetime.
No, I think I mean we're both young enough that I think it'll be in our lifetime. By the time we're in our 40s or 50s, I think the new paradigm will be here. And we'll be the ones saying, "We told you so. We were the ones that were right all along." Yay. Hopefully.
Yeah. Anyway, I've been Mr. E.
I've been Dalton Mortimer, the Authenticator. We have been the Duality of Man, mansplaining the election. But I'm Ching. Cheers, guys.
Bye, everybody.